Why smart people make terrible money decisions. Some of the smartest people in America make some of the worst financial decisions. Doctors, engineers, lawyers, executives, people with advanced degrees, high IQs, successful careers. And yet, every year, many of them lose fortunes they spent decades building. Some invest in obvious scams. Some buy things they can't afford. Some stay trapped in debt despite earning six figures. And some make financial mistakes so devastating, they spend years trying to recover. How is that possible? How can someone be brilliant at work and terrible with money? The answer is surprising. Because money problems are rarely caused by a lack of intelligence. In fact, intelligence can sometimes make financial mistakes even more dangerous. And once you understand why, you'll begin to see financial decisions very differently. Let's begin. Meet Andrew. At 48 years old, Andrew seemed to have everything figured out. He was a successful engineer, respected by his colleagues, admired by friends, the kind of person people described as smart, very smart. Throughout his life, intelligence had been his advantage. Good grades, a great university, a stable career, a comfortable income. Whenever a problem appeared, he found a solution. That's what intelligent people do. They solve problems. But there was one problem Andrew never expected. Money. Not because he wasn't earning enough. Quite the opposite. By most standards, Andrew was doing very well. His salary exceeded six figures. His home was beautiful. His career was thriving. And yet, something strange kept happening. The more money he earned, the more financial stress he felt. At first, he ignored it. Everyone feels stress sometimes, right? But then something unexpected happened. His income increased dramatically. A promotion, a larger paycheck, a major career milestone, the kind of opportunity many people dream about. Andrew assumed his financial worries would disappear. Instead, they got worse. His spending increased. His expectations increased. His obligations increased. And somehow, the freedom he expected never arrived. That confused him, because according to logic, more income should create more security. But reality was telling a different story. And that was only the beginning. One evening, Andrew attended a dinner with several friends. The group included doctors, business owners, a corporate attorney, highly educated people, successful people. As the conversation shifted toward money, something fascinating happened. Everyone seemed worried. Not one person felt financially secure. The attorney worried about retirement. The doctor worried about investments. The business owner worried about losing everything. The concerns were different, but the feeling was the same. Anxiety. And Andrew couldn't stop thinking about it. These weren't irresponsible people. These weren't reckless people. These were some of the smartest individuals he knew. So why did they all seem trapped in the same cycle? That question stayed with him. And eventually, he became obsessed with finding the answer. What he discovered next changed everything. For years, Andrew assumed financial success worked like academic success. Learn enough. Work hard enough. Make smart decisions. And you'll succeed. Simple. Logical. Predictable. But money doesn't work that way. Because financial decisions aren't made by logic alone. They're made by human beings. And human beings are emotional creatures. Even when we believe we're being rational, most people never realize this. The human brain evolved to survive danger, not to manage investment portfolios, not to navigate modern financial markets, not to evaluate long-term risk, and certainly not to remain calm when money is involved. In fact, the same brain that helped our ancestors survive can sometimes become our greatest financial enemy. Consider this. If the stock market falls sharply, what feels safer? Selling everything or doing nothing? For many people, selling feels safer, even when it's the wrong decision. Why? Because emotions demand action. Fear wants movement. Fear wants certainty. Fear wants relief. And intelligent people are not immune. In fact, they're often better at rationalizing emotional decisions. That's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because intelligence doesn't always protect us from mistakes. Sometimes it helps us justify them. Andrew discovered study after study showing something surprising. Highly intelligent people often make the same financial mistakes as everyone else. Sometimes even bigger mistakes. Why? Because intelligence creates confidence. And confidence can become overconfidence. The engineer believes he understands markets. The doctor believes she can predict outcomes. The executive believes his judgment is superior. And sometimes, that confidence becomes expensive. very expensive. But the real surprise came later. Andrew began examining his own financial decisions. And what he found was uncomfortable. Many of his biggest money decisions weren't based on logic at all. They were based on emotion. The expensive car, the larger house, the investment he barely researched, the purchases he justified because he deserved them. Every decision seemed logical at the time, until he looked deeper. And that's when he realized something most people never see. We don't make decisions based on facts. We make decisions based on stories. Stories about success. Stories about security. Stories about status. Stories about who we believe we are. And once a story becomes powerful enough, facts often become secondary. What Andrew discovered next would completely change the way he viewed money. Because the biggest financial mistakes aren't caused by a lack of knowledge. They're caused by something far more human and far more dangerous. That dangerous force is emotion. Not the dramatic emotions people imagine. Not panic. Not greed. Not fear alone. Something much subtler. The need to feel safe. The need to belong. The need to be respected. The need to feel successful. Most financial decisions are not really about money. They're about emotions disguised as logic. And that's exactly what Andrew began to notice. When he bought a larger house, he told himself it was an investment. When he upgraded his car, he called it practical. When he increased his spending, he said he was improving his quality of life. All reasonable explanations. All logical. Or so he thought. But when he looked deeper, he realized those decisions were driven by something else. Status. Identity. Social pressure. The desire to keep up. Not because anyone forced him. Because he quietly compared himself to others. And comparison is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. Most people never realize this. A person can earn twice as much as they did 10 years ago and still feel behind because someone else earns more. Someone else owns a bigger house. Someone else appears more successful. The target keeps moving. And that's where intelligent people often struggle because they assume awareness protects them. It doesn't. Knowing about a trap is very different from avoiding it. Andrew knew about lifestyle inflation, yet he experienced it. He understood emotional spending, yet he justified it. He knew markets were unpredictable, yet he believed he could predict them. And that's when he discovered something fascinating. The human brain doesn't want truth. It wants comfort, comfortable stories, comfortable beliefs, comfortable explanations. And when money becomes involved, those stories become incredibly persuasive. But then something unexpected happened. Andrew met a financial advisor who asked him a simple question, a question he had never considered before. The advisor asked, "Tell me about your worst financial decision." Andrew immediately thought about a bad investment, a stock he sold too early, a missed opportunity. But the advisor shook his head. "No, I'm not asking about your worst investment. I'm asking about your worst decision." The distinction seemed small, but it changed everything. Because investments are often symptoms. Decisions are the cause. And that question stayed with him for weeks, months, maybe even years. Until one day, the answer became obvious. His worst financial decision wasn't an investment. It was believing that intelligence alone would protect him. And that's where the story takes its biggest turn. Andrew had spent decades trying to become smarter, more knowledgeable, more informed, more educated. But financial success wasn't primarily about intelligence. It was about behavior. That realization shocked him. Because modern society teaches the opposite. We're told that smart people make smart decisions. And sometimes they do. But financial decisions operate under a different set of rules. Because money activates emotions. And emotions change behavior. A brilliant surgeon can panic during a market crash. A successful lawyer can overspend. A talented entrepreneur can fall for a scam. Not because they're unintelligent. Because they're human. The research was everywhere. People with extraordinary intelligence still struggled financially. People with average intelligence often built substantial wealth. Why? Because wealth is less about knowing what to do and more about consistently doing it. The difference sounds simple, but it changes everything. Imagine two people. One has exceptional knowledge. The other has average knowledge. The first constantly changes strategy, chases trends, overthinks decisions, acts emotionally. The second follows a simple plan. Remains patient, avoids unnecessary risks, stays consistent. Who wins? More often than not, the second person. And that's deeply uncomfortable for many intelligent people, because it suggests that success isn't always earned through superior knowledge. Sometimes it's earned through superior behavior, and behavior is much harder to master. Andrew began looking at money differently, not as a math problem, but as a behavior problem. Suddenly, everything made more sense. The investor who constantly traded stocks, the executive who spent beyond his means, the doctor carrying enormous debt, the entrepreneur chasing one opportunity after another. The common thread wasn't intelligence. It was behavior. Financial success wasn't primarily about being smarter. It was about becoming calmer, more patient, more disciplined, more self-aware. And that's when Andrew started making different choices. Not dramatic choices, small ones. He stopped trying to predict the market. He stopped chasing financial headlines. He stopped comparing himself to others. He focused on what he could control: his savings rate, his spending habits, his long-term plan. At first, the changes seemed insignificant. But over time, something remarkable happened. His stress began to decrease. His confidence began to increase. Not because he became richer, because he became more intentional. Most people think financial confidence comes from having more money. But often, it comes from having more clarity, knowing where you're going, knowing why you're going there, and refusing to let emotions drive the vehicle. The real surprise came later, because Andrew eventually discovered that many wealthy people shared one trait: not brilliance, not genius, not extraordinary intelligence. Consistency. They followed simple principles. For years, sometimes decades, while others searched for shortcuts, the wealthy quietly stayed on course. And that's when the final lesson finally became clear. One evening, Andrew looked back at his life, at all the financial decisions he'd made, the good ones, the bad ones, the expensive ones, and he noticed something surprising. His biggest mistakes had never occurred when he lacked information. They happened when emotions overwhelmed judgment. Fear, ego, impatience, excitement. The information had always been available. The challenge was applying it consistently. And suddenly, the entire mystery made sense. Financial success was never an intelligence contest. It was an emotional management contest. The people who won weren't always the smartest. They were often the most disciplined, the most patient, the most self-aware, the people who understood their own weaknesses and built systems to protect themselves from them. That realization changed everything, because it meant financial success was available to far more people than most believe. Not just geniuses, not just experts, not just financial professionals. Ordinary people. People willing to control their behavior. People willing to remain patient. People willing to think long-term. And perhaps that's one of the most hopeful financial lessons of all. So, why do smart people make terrible money decisions? Because intelligence alone isn't enough. Knowledge isn't enough. Information isn't enough. Money is emotional, and emotions can overpower even the smartest minds. The truth is that financial success isn't about making perfect decisions. It's about avoiding catastrophic ones. It's about staying consistent when others panic, remaining patient when others chase shortcuts, and remembering that wealth is built through behavior far more often than brilliance. Because at the end of the day, the stock market doesn't reward intelligence. It rewards discipline. Money doesn't care about your IQ. It cares about your habits. And financial freedom isn't reserved for the smartest people in the room. It's often achieved by the people who understand themselves the best. The people who know when to act, when to wait, and when to ignore the emotions telling them to do something foolish. Because in the end, the greatest financial skill isn't intelligence. It's self-control. And once you understand that, you may finally understand why so many smart people struggle with money, and why so many ordinary people quietly build extraordinary wealth.